we started Go Roughly Around the World on a couple of older BMWs. This is a Triumph Tiger 900 Rally Pro. So what is going on here?
So obviously we have switched bikes. After Greg's accident in Guatemala, after he got hit by the chicken bus and Moxie passed away, we went to the dealerships in Guatemala to test out some other bikes.
And the reason is because my bike was pretty much totaled. It was going to cost considerably more to fix it and repair it than it was going to be worth for an older bike.
Yeah. And then I was riding with Moxie on Luna Laguna, and she was the bike that I did the Arctic Ocean on with her, and we had all of these adventures together. And, it just didn't feel right riding that same bike with potentially a different dog or without her. So I wanted to see what else was out there, and if Greg was going to switch bikes, then maybe it was time for me to switch bikes too. So we tested out all the different brands in Guatemala. We were on the Aprilia 660, the Touareg. We tried the Tenere 700,
The Norden 901.
the Norden 901, the KTM 890,
The Ducati Desert X.
the Desert X, which was huge and tall,
The F850.
the F850 for BMW, and the Triumph Tiger 900 Rally Pro. After testing them all out, the moment that I got on this one, it just felt right. I sat on it. It was comfortable. It suited me. I felt like it had great balance. Like all of these things that like I was looking for in a bike, like it just all came together in one. And it's like I realized it right away.
Yeah, Jess looked over at me. I was there with like a broken paw, with all the pins and everything, and her eyes just kind of lit up, and she just had this smile on her face, and she's like, it just feels so good. It feels so like refined and yet badass at the same time. And I guess it kind of makes me think a little bit of the sort of James Bond of motorcycles. And I know they have like their 007 version, but like super refined and elegant, and yet can definitely like pack a wallop,
And it was funny, after looking at some of the other bikes, like this one, it felt luxurious and it felt so well made. Like even just looking at the engine and how it was put together and the details that they've put on it, it just made me feel really like this is a special bike, and I'm really starting to love this.
So Jess, was like kind of walking on clouds after that and saying like, I think this is the bike. I don't know. I really like it. And of course, I'm looking over at the price tag, and I'm like, we're trying to build a small business. Okay. Roughly is a small business with lots of sort of employees in Guatemala and lots going on, and we're responsible for it. At the same time, we're, trying to ride around the world. Who gets new motorcycles when they're doing that? So there's really was and is no way that a gorgeous and new and just top of the line bike like this was going to be something that we could purchase. And even if we had the money to buy a couple of new ones, could we justify that? So, on a sort of whim, Jess said, I'm going to reach out to
Triumph North America. I let them know what we were doing. I talked about the pilgrimage that we initially wanted the bikes for, and then continuing on for Go Roughly Around the World. And when you meet people who love dogs, who love motorcycles, like they just get it. It's really surprising. The people who we talk to who don't necessarily like love dogs, and they don't really have that same feel towards them, there's quite a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And Triumph North America, they have dogs everywhere. Everybody's got a dog. They love dogs. They love animals, and they just understood.
It just clicked. Yeah. So we found a couple of wonderful champions, and we just started talking and seeing what could happen, and something happened. And we couldn't be more thrilled for it. Now, this bike has a shit ton of power.
Yeah.
And I feel very vindicated and justified in saying shit ton. This is a powerful bike. So compared to your 650, compared to my 700, there's a lot happening here.
So there was that concern. Like obviously the bikes that I mentioned that we went and checked out, they were all within that sort of what do they call it? The mid-range, mid-weight range. this was obviously at the top end of what I was thinking of, and the reason was because I was obviously on a 650, and the weight difference I was concerned about. I wasn't sure if how I would do with a heavier bike, especially off road and having to pick it up. So those were my issues.
And it is sort of hard to kind of wrap your head around. I mean, we are not those who've tried out a bunch of different bikes and sort of, know the field in that sense of like the intricacies between them. So it's hard to wrap your head around what am I gaining from a much more capable off-road bike, shocks and 21-inch tire, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, compared to what I'm maybe sacrificing in the weight.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think we both had some apprehensions about it. I think that was the only apprehension.
That was my well, and yours too, but what was your main apprehension?
So my apprehension was, I mean, weight is weight, and, we're very heavily loaded. You with a dog, me with all the camping gear. My apprehension was this is a taller bike. Now, really around the adventure sort of segment, they're all sort of in this range of height,
and they're made
right?
for taller guys.
33-inch, 34-inch seat heights. I mean, that's really what you're finding. So,
and Greg has an inseam of 30, and I have an inseam of like 32, 33.
Something like that. Jess has a couple of inches on me. So, it's not to say that the Tiger is larger than or taller than the Field.
No.
It's very much within the field.
Like, for example, the Norden 901, I felt was the tallest out of... Oh, and the Desert X. Those were both very tall bikes for me. And maybe it was just the seat and the way that I was positioned. But it was interesting because when Greg and I both sat on these bikes, I was able to touch the floor pretty well. Like I was a bit on my tippy toes when it was in the standard position in the lowered seat position. But when Greg was on it, like, there was a lot of difference. And it made me think my legs must be longer, just there are proportions. And so that obviously makes a difference too.
Yeah, for sure.
And the wider seat versus the narrower seat also can play into that.
So a couple of sort of adjustments or modifications to really feel at home on these bikes. Number one, we got our seats lowered, sort of carved out. So these are the standard seats. They still have the seat warmer element.
Which I love.
But we took them over to Legendary Best Motorcycle Seats in Ventura.
Yep.
And they were able to carve it out, really give a little bit of additional narrowness to the seat. And carve it down a little bit without sacrificing much in the way, as far as I can tell, of comfort.
Yeah, and so what they do is you send them in a photo. So they go to the rallies a lot, so you'll see them there. But because we were doing this remotely, we sent them photos of us sitting on the bike. So then Adrian could see how close or how far back we would sit so that he knew exactly where to put the sort of the dip for the butt. And so that really helped. And by narrowing out the sides, with this setup now, I'm flat-footed basically a little bit. And Greg, what are you at now?
So that helped me quite a bit.
Yeah.
Now the next piece for me is I installed the.
You didn't install anything.
Well, fortunately, I didn't have to. It would have been a job. I had installed for me a Touratech progressive shock lowering kit. So basically, what it involves is removing the springs from the two front forks and from the monoshock in the rear, and replacing them with these progressive forks. Or progressive springs. It does two things. It lowers it about an inch, I guess 2 centimeters or so. So that's key, right? And then the progressive, if I sort of understand and have my head wrapped around it correctly, I mean, the way that it goes into the compression really is a bit more moderate, and a bit more like preventing sort of the ground, bottoming out type of deal. And so you get some additional performance, some additional shock action, as well as the lowering. And you kind of avoid like the link kits and everything that I guess this could be used with that, but
Greg didn't need that much.
Yeah, for all intents and purposes, you don't see a difference to the naked eye.
I know. I'm just looking back and forth. We've got the other bike here, and you really can't tell the difference. So
those were sort of the two key things that made this for me as a shorter rider.
Touratech really set you up with those.
Yeah, this made
kit.
It possible,
yeah.
Right? The lowering the seat,
and I think
and the Touratech.
Yeah, I think maybe you want to mention about how how you weren't feeling as confident as a rider at that time when we were getting these bikes because your hand still wasn't in best condition.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is an ongoing element. I don't want to talk like it's over, because look, the hand is pretty much fully functional after 5 pins and a whole lot of mess here. But there's still a lot of strength that needs to be rebuilt in the hand itself, as well as just generally, because I had basically been unable to do anything for 3 to 4 months. And so I don't feel at my tip-top best, right? I just don't feel as strong, like bull, as I once did. And so that plays into it, right? You've got a bit of a bigger bike. It's a more powerful bike, which doesn't sort of translate apples to apples into anything other than, wow, this is a lot of bike. So yeah, I've been kind of going through my own process of settling into this. I hadn't ridden in 3 or 4 months. And then we just kind of jumped on these guys, packed them up the very next day, fully loaded, and started doing a GoRUFFLY Pilgrimage activities where we're visiting all these people doing amazing things with their dogs. And so massively super loaded, not just because of the normal stuff, but also carrying all the goodies from our GoRUFFLY sponsor, GoRUFFLY Pilgrimage sponsors.
Yeah.
That are like extra loading my bike down. It's been a bit of a process of getting comfortable. And really what I'm finding is that probably the only other adjustment that I think the both of us would like, based on our sizes. Again, Jess is about 5'9" or so. I'm about 5'7".
Excuse me.
So, the only adjustments that I think we would additionally do to this down the line is maybe a rocks riser type of handlebar adjustment to bring them back just a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like they're quite far forward, which makes me sit really close up front. And I generally do on my other bike. I did as well. I just like that feel, but I feel like I'm still stretching a little bit too much. So I would like to bring them up and in.
And look, at the end of the day, this, I think, is where a bike is made for a, average, probably human male.
Mhm.
And I'm shorter than an average human male. You're not an average human male. And so we have to make some adjustments.
Yeah.
There's no question that the bike just absolutely screams.
Oh my God, it like flies. It's that feeling of like you can go in first gear and you can just be smooth as ever. Like, and I think I'm comparing this obviously to my 650, which was a single. This is a triple, so there's a big difference. And it's just smooth. It has the quick shifter, which is really fun, so you can just flick up without having to pull the clutch in. And then the other huge difference for me was the shock. Like, the suspension on this bike is so good. Like, you don't feel the potholes. You don't feel going over the speed bumps if you go just a little bit too fast, which I often do. And it just glides. And I was telling Greg, like, we were in stop and go traffic, and I was just sort of rolling along. I'm like, Greg, this thing balances so well. Like, you just give it a little bit and it just goes. I'm in love with it.
I mean, at one point we had a little bit of sort of the reverse of what you expect, where you're like dodging potholes. We kind of were looking for them, like, I'm gonna dip into that one and see if I feel it. So I'm being a little facetious, but like, it really is sort of a process of testing it out and getting that feel for like, this shock just has travel. It is so smooth. I think at one point I said it's like it basically rides like putting warm butter onto bread, and not like toast where it's gotten all like crumply and everything from the heat, but like smooth bread. It's just super smooth. So it's early days still.
Yeah.
I think we're loving the shit out of it. There's no question. There's still that transition process, of course, coming from different bikes and from,
And to be fair, we haven't done like big off-roads. We haven't done any of that yet.
We're just getting started.
We're still getting used to it. So we haven't dropped it yet. So we're not sure what it's going to be like when we
That's
pick them
coming
up.
very soon.
But we have been enjoying like going just through these mountain roads here. It's been fantastic.
So one other thing I want to mention is the cockpit. So the cockpit is installed on here beautifully. Ultimately, this is Moxie's cockpit. And so we just wanted to like retrofit it to fit on this bike. It was ultimately a matter of drilling 4 new holes, because when you're going from one style adventure bike to another, it generally is as simple as that. Sometimes there's a little bit to it, but in this case it was quite straightforward. And so we've got Moxie's cockpit on here, just beautifully positioned and well supported. And as you can see, I mean, Jess sits a little bit further forward maybe
Yeah.
than the average human male, but there isn't a lot of cockpit that's extended beyond the rear of the bike.
Yeah, it all fits really nicely on this bike. It's pretty amazing.
So imaginary German Shepherd Moxie with her 75 pounds, I mean, head, torso, front paws are all right here.
Yeah.
And then the lesser bit of her is back here, you know. So really the bulk of her weight is right there, right behind Jess, giving an imaginary paw tap to the back whenever she needs to use the bathroom.
Yeah.
So, yeah, gorgeous new bikes. Thrilled to be on them. Thrilled to sort of have this just incredible support from Triumph North America, because without them, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just not possible to do this and create a small business and try and ride around the world. So we couldn't be more grateful. And, you know, when it happens to be sort of, there's always that thing about, well, you use the gear that someone sponsors you if you're fortunate enough to get sponsored. It's quite an amazing thing when it turns out to be sort of like the thing that you fall in love with, in this case that you fell in love with, and then go after them and they fall in love with the idea as well. I mean, that's sort of the
having
perfect...
that connection. It's, yeah, that's the best of both worlds.
It really is. That's the best situation. You don't feel like you're, well, I'm getting a discount on this, or I'm getting, you know, I'm getting this provided to me, but this really isn't sort of my dream machine, or this isn't maybe the thing that makes me sort of excited to get up and ride in the morning. It's pretty special when you get sort of all of that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, stay tuned for more of our videos about the Triumph Tiger. You'll see us on the dirt. You'll probably see us dropping the bikes.
We've got episodes of A GoRUFFLY Pilgrimage that will be coming out in coming weeks.
Yeah.
And then we continue on with a GoRUFFLY Around the World adventure with a new canine moto cockpit co-pilot. It's going to be a new cockpit. It's going to be a new co-pilot in the cockpit.
All of it's going to be new. Stay tuned.